Hello, tonight we step not into the forums of Cicero or the battlefields of Caesar, but into the hours when those places fell silent. We are going to follow the night across the 7 hills to understand what happened when the Senate slept, and the emperors, for once, could not be seen. This is not the city of marble and proclamation, but the city of shadows and necessity, the Rome that had to breathe, even in darkness. So, before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this. Now, dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun has begun its slide behind the Janiculum Hill, that long ridge west of the Tiber that catches the last light like a slow curtain falling. From the Capitoline, you can watch it go a disc of bronze, softening into amber, then into the thin red line that lingers on the horizon long after the disc itself has vanished. The city, for a moment, holds its breath. All day, the noise has been tremendous. The hammer of bronze workers in the Argiletum, the haggling of fishmongers near the Tiber Island, the shouts of litter-bearers cursing their way through crowds too dense to part. But now, that noise begins to thin. The fish are sold or rotting. The bronze has cooled. The last buyer has finally agreed on a price for a dozen eggs and a bunch of onions, and he is walking home with them wrapped in a scrap of cloth, his footsteps the only sound in a street suddenly empty. The shops close one by one. Not with any ceremony, just the heavy wooden shutters pulled across the openings, barred from inside with iron brackets. You hear them going, street by street, a sequence of dull thuds like a heartbeat slowing toward sleep. The vendor of pickled fish near the Forum of Caesar is already rolling his jars back into the recesses of his stall. The woman who sells garlands for sacrifices is gathering her unsold flowers, and for a moment the air smells not of dust and urine and cooking oil, but of wilted roses. In the forums, the politicians have gone. The basilicas empty their last clerks, who walk quickly with their tablets tucked under their arms, hoping to reach their lodgings before the light fails entirely. The temples are locked, the priests having performed the final ritual of the day, the closing of the god's eyes, so to speak, though no Roman would put it that way. The gods, like the city, are simply turning inward. On the Aventine, the wealthy are already behind their doors. Their slaves move through interior courtyards, lighting the oil lamps one by one, pulling the wool curtains across the doorways to keep the evening chill at bay. Dinner is being served in rooms painted with scenes from the Trojan War, diners reclining on couches, eating with their fingers from shared platters, speaking of rents and marriages and the morning's races. They do not think about the streets beyond their doors. Those streets belong to someone else now. Down in the Subura, the poor are also behind doors, thin doors, poorly fitted, through which the sounds of neighbors seep like water through cracked clay. A child crying, a man coughing, a woman humming something her mother taught her, half remembered. The insulae rise 5 or 6 stories into the darkening sky, their wooden balconies jutting out like the decks of ships moored too close together. And from somewhere, perhaps from a rooftop, perhaps from a doorway, comes the sound of a single flute. It is not a tune exactly, more a long wandering note that rises and falls without hurry. Someone is playing as the light goes, a private ritual, a greeting to the night that has nothing to do with gods or emperors. The note hangs in the cooling air, and then it too fades. The city exhales. The rhythm has changed. What comes now is not sleep, not yet, but something else. A different kind of life, conducted in doorways and back alleys, in the glow of distant fires and the footsteps of men who walk with purpose while everyone else walks carefully home. Rome has not ended. It has only turned inside out. The sun has been down for nearly 2 hours now. The last flute note faded long ago, and the streets have settled into that particular quiet that settles over a city when honest people are behind locked doors. But on the Via Lata, just inside the line of the old Servian wall, there is a compound where the quiet does not apply. This is the barracks of the 7th cohort of the Vigiles, the Night Watch, and here the night is just beginning. 7,000 men serve in the Vigiles, spread across the 14 regions of the city. But on any given night, it is the men of a single cohort who will walk the streets you might walk, were you out after dark. And in this barracks, on this night, a century of them is preparing to go out. The building itself is unremarkable, a rectangular courtyard surrounded by low arches, sleeping quarters along one side, stables along another, and a small shrine to the gods who protect against fire. Augustus founded the Vigiles 40 years ago, in the wake of fires that had consumed whole neighborhoods, while the rich man's slaves stood by and watched. Before that, there was no one. Now there are 7,000, and they are all that stands between Rome and the flames that never stop wanting to consume her. In the lamplight of the barracks room, men are lacing their boots. The leather is thick, worn soft by months of walking, and it creaks with each pull of the thong. The sound is steady, rhythmic, one man, then another, until the room fills with the noise of 50 men preparing to move. It sounds, if you close your eyes, like the rigging of small boats tugging at their moorings, ready to cast off into a dark sea. There is no hurry in their movements. These men have done this 1,000 times. They know the night ahead, the long hours, the cold, the monotony, broken only by moments of sudden, desperate action. They pace themselves as athletes do, conserving what they will need before the dawn. A young recruit, perhaps on his first month of duty, might fumble with his straps, might check his gear twice, 3 times. The veterans simply pull the leather tight, tie the knot, and stand. The gear is laid out on wooden benches along the wall. Each man has his assigned equipment, and each piece is checked before the night begins. There are buckets leather, collapsible, carried over the shoulder like a soldier's pack. There are axes, not for fighting, but for forcing entry through doors and walls when fire blocks the only door. There are heavy wool blankets, soaked in water and vinegar, used to smother flames before they spread. There are ropes and grappling hooks, and long poles with hooks on the end, used to pull down burning timbers before they collapse onto the street below. And there is the vinegar. In clay jars, stoppered with wax, each man carries a small supply. When water is scarce, and in Rome it often is, the fountains running low in the dry months, vinegar can be thrown on a fire to smother it, the acid robbing the flames of what they need to breathe. The smell of vinegar follows the Vigiles everywhere, a sharp, sour scent that clings to their tunics and announces their presence long before their torches come into view. In the courtyard, the centurion stands waiting. He carries no bucket, no axe. His equipment is a staff of office and the authority to use it. Around him, the men form ranks, not the tight formation of legionaries preparing for battle, but something looser, more practical. These are not soldiers, though many are former slaves who earned their freedom through this service. They are firefighters, policemen, the only authority the streets will know until dawn. The centurion does not speak loudly. There is no speech, no rousing call to duty. He simply nods, and the men begin to move toward the gate. 100 pairs of boots on stone, the creak of leather, the clank of iron against iron. At the gate, each man takes a torch from the basket and lights it from the brazier that burns there all night. The flames catch, one by one, until the courtyard glows with 100 small suns. They step out into the street. The Via Lata is empty, the shops shuttered, the only sound the trickle of water from a nearby fountain. The men fan out, not in formation but in pairs, each assigned to a different route through the region. Some will walk the main streets, their torches visible from a distance, a warning to anyone who might think the night belongs to them. Others will take the alleys, the back ways, the passages where fire might start unnoticed and grow into something that could level a neighborhood before dawn. The centurion watches them go. He has done this for years, watched men walk into the dark and return, or not return, or return carrying the bodies of those who did not. There is no predicting what the night will bring. There is only the preparation, the ritual, the 1,000 small checks and balances that turn 100 men into something larger than themselves. Behind him, the barracks grows quiet. The brazier still burns at the gate. The shrine to the gods still holds its offerings of wine and grain. And out in the streets, the Vigiles begin their first round, their torches moving through the darkness like fireflies, like the last lights of a city that has not yet learned to sleep. The century has dissolved into the city now, pairs of men peeling away at intersections, their torches dwindling into the distance like stars swallowed by clouds. On the Vicus Patricius, near the slopes of the Viminal Hill, 2 Vigiles walk side by side, their footsteps the only rhythm in a street empty of all other motion. The flame of one torch throws their shadows long against the shuttered storefronts, stretching and contracting with each step as if the night itself is breathing. They do not walk quickly. Speed is not the goal. The goal is coverage, presence, the slow and methodical passing of eyes over every door, every window, every narrow gap between buildings where a fire might take hold unseen. A quick walker misses things. A quick walker hears only his own breath. These men have learned to walk slowly, to let the city reveal itself at its own pace. The street is paved with basalt blocks, worn smooth by centuries of cartwheels and sandaled feet. The Vigiles know every uneven stone, every place where water pools after rain, every spot where a loose block might turn an ankle in the dark. They do not need to look down. Their eyes are elsewhere on the upper stories of the insulae, where a careless tenant's oil lamp might gutter too close to a wooden shutter, on the doorways of workshops, where embers from a day's forging might still smoulder in the ash, on the roof lines, where a spark could land unnoticed and feed on the dry timber of a balcony until the whole block goes up. From time to time, one of them stops to test a door, not to enter. They have no right of entry without cause, but to feel the wood, to press gently against it, to see if it gives. A door left unbarred is an invitation, not just to thieves but to the night itself, to the draught that could carry a spark from the street into the heart of a building. The Vigile pushes, finds resistance, nods to his partner. The door is secure. They move on. Occasionally one calls out, not a command, not a challenge, just a word, a name, a question cast into the dark. All quiet, or simply, ho, there. It is not meant to be answered, not really. It is a signal, a way of announcing presence, of letting anyone who might be listening know that the night watch is here, that the streets are not as empty as they seem. Sometimes a dog barks in response, far off, somewhere in the warren of alleys below the Quirinal. Sometimes there is only silence. The dogs are everywhere, though. Rome is full of them, strays that bed down in the doorways of temples, watchdogs chained in the courtyards of the rich, half-wild packs that roam the dump heaps near the Tiber. At night, their voices carry. A bark on the Aventine might be answered on the Palatine. a chain reaction of sound that travels across the city like a wave. The Vigiles listen to them as they listen to everything, passing the noise for meaning. A single bark is nothing, a sudden chorus, a shift from warning to alarm, that is something else, that is a sign. On the Esquiline, another pair passes the entrance to the Colosseum, the great imperial complex that sprawls near the old wall. No light shows from within. The Emperor is elsewhere, probably on the Palatine, surrounded by guards of a very different kind. But the Vigiles note the building anyway. Note the shadows of the cypress trees that line its walls. Note the way the wind moves through their branches. A fire here would not be a neighborhood disaster. It would be a political one. They walk on, filing the observation away, adding it to the 1,000 small details that accumulate over a night's patrol. Near the Forum of Augustus, they encounter the first human presence since leaving the barracks. A man, alone, walking quickly with his head down and his cloak pulled tight. He sees their torches before they see him. The light carries, announces them from a distance, and he steps aside, presses himself against a wall, waits for them to pass. It is not fear, exactly. Or it is, but the ordinary fear of any citizen encountering authority in the dark. The Vigiles do not stop him. They have no reason. He is walking, not running. He is alone, not a crowd. He is simply someone who needed to be out after dark, and that is not a crime. They pass him without a word, and the street is empty again. The night deepens. The first round will take hours, a slow circuit through the region's boundaries, down its main streets and back through its alleys, a net cast over the darkness. By the time they return to their starting point, the moon will have moved across the sky, and the second watch will be preparing to relieve them. But that is far ahead. For now, there is only the street, the torch, the next door to test, the next sound to pass from the silence. And they listen, always they listen, not for footsteps, not for whispers, not for the sounds of human trouble, those can wait. They listen for the one sound that means everything is already lost. The crackle of flame, the pop of timber catching, the sudden roar of air feeding a fire that has found its breath. In a city of wood and candlelight, of oil lamps left burning and braziers untended, that sound is the sound of endings. So far tonight there is only silence. The Vigiles walk on, and Rome sleeps on, and the two continue their ancient dance, the city that burns, and the men who walk to stop it, locked together in the dark until dawn. The Vigiles have moved on now, their torches fading toward the Viminal, and the street returns to what passes for silence in a city of stone and water. But the silence is not empty. It is filled with something. The day drowns out a sound so constant, so pervasive, that those who live with it soon cease to hear it at all. The sound of water. Rome is a city of fountains. The aqueducts bring water from the hills, from springs dozens of miles away, channeled through stone arches that stride across the countryside like the legs of giants. The water enters the city at pressure, forced upward into distribution tanks, then released downward into a network of lead pipes that branch beneath the streets like roots. And at the end of those pipes, in every neighborhood, in every plaza, at every major intersection, the water emerges again into the air. The fountains never stop. Night and day, summer and winter, through sieges and triumphs and fires and floods, the water flows. It pours from stone spouts into stone basins, cascades down carved marble into lower pools, spills over rims into gutters that carry it away to the Tiber. The sound is different at every fountain, a steady gush where the fall is high, a gentle trickle where the spout is low, a musical splash where the basin is wide and the water falls in sheets. Taken together, the fountains of Rome create a liquid backdrop to every human sound, a river of noise that runs beneath the city's waking life. At night, with the human sounds withdrawn, the water asserts itself. In the Forum of Nerva, a lone fountain fills the space with its pulse, the water echoing off the colonnades like rain in an empty courtyard. Near the Circus Maximus, a series of smaller fountains mark the route of the Aqua Appia, their sounds overlapping and separating like voices in conversation. And on a quiet side street leading up the Aventine, a single basin catches the moonlight and holds it, a silver disc trembling on the surface with each fresh inflow. It is to this fountain that a figure comes, walking carefully in the dark. A woman, her face hidden by the hood of a coarse wool cloak, carrying an empty amphora against her hip. She is a slave from one of the large houses above, not a kitchen slave, not important enough to draw water from the house's private supply, but trusted enough to be sent out after dark when the jars run low before dawn. Her mistress will expect her back quickly. But for now, in this moment, she is alone. She kneels at the basin's edge. The stone is cold through her tunic, worn smooth by generations of knees that came before hers. She dips the amphora carefully, angling it so the water flows in without splashing, without wasting. The sound of the filling jar is different from the sound of the fountain, a deeper note, a resonance that changes as the water rises. She listens to it without thinking, the way one listens to one's own breathing. Across the city, in a different kind of neighborhood, a man does the same. He is old, a freedman who lives in a cramped room on the top floor of an insula near the Subura. His building has no running water, few do, and so each evening he makes the walk to the nearest fountain, a journey that grows harder with each passing year. He carries 2 buckets suspended from a wooden yoke across his shoulders, and he moves slowly, carefully, afraid of falling, afraid of spilling, afraid of the long climb back up the stairs with nothing to show for his trouble. The fountain here is busy, even at this hour. A half-dozen figures cluster around it, their shapes barely visible in the starlight. A boy with a skin bag, a woman with a child on her hip, another slave, this one from a different house, who nods to the old man as he approaches. They do not speak. There is no need. They are all here for the same reason, all performing the same ritual, all part of the same quiet economy that keeps the city alive while the rich sleep. The water falls, the jars fill, the figures disperse, one by one, back into the dark streets from which they came, and the fountain continues its work, receiving the moonlight, holding it for a moment, then releasing it downstream toward the river. In a city without streetlights, the fountains are the only lamps, not of flame, but of reflection, catching the stars and the moon and throwing them back up at the faces of those who kneel to drink. The fountains have been running for hours now, their silver surfaces catching the moon as it climbs toward its zenith. The streets are empty. The Vigiles have passed through twice, their torches casting long shadows that dissolved again into darkness. Rome holds its breath in the space between watches, that deep hour when even the most restless have finally found some version of sleep. But in a narrow street behind the Circus Flaminius, a door opens. The man who steps through it is called Lucius Annius Crescens, though his customers know him only by the stamp on their bread, the letters L-A-C pressed into the crust before baking, a mark that guarantees the loaf came from his oven. He is a pistorum, a baker, and this hour, the second after midnight, is the hour when his work begins. Behind him, the bakery yawns open into darkness. He carries no torch, he does not need one. His hands know the way to the oven, the shelves, the bins of flour that stand against the far wall. He moves through the space like a man walking in his sleep, except that he is more awake now than he has been all day. The night is when he lives. The day is only an interruption. The oven dominates the back room. It is a dome of brick and clay, built against the wall to share its heat with the rest of the space. Its mouth a low arch just large enough for a man to crawl inside for cleaning. At this hour, it is cold, but not for long. Lucius kneels before the oven and begins his ritual. First, the kindling dry sticks and shavings left from yesterday's work, arranged in a careful nest. Then the larger wood, oak scavenged from the building sites along the Campus Martius, split and stacked to season for months. He strikes flint against steel, once, twice, and the spark catches in the tinder. He blows gently, a long practiced breath that feeds the flame without smothering it, and the kindling crackles into life. The fire grows. Lucius feeds it slowly, adding wood piece by piece, watching the flames lick up the dome's interior. The brick begins to change color, dark with soot at first, then gradually lightening as the heat increases. He will feed this fire for more than an hour, until the dome is white hot, until the heat radiates back into the room and forces him to step away. Only then will he rake out the coals and slide the bread inside. But that is later. Now there is the dough. In the front room, behind the counter where customers buy their loaves during the day, the flour waits in large clay jars. Lucius measures it by eye, by feel, by the weight of the scoop in his hand. Coarse flour, ground from emmer wheat, speckled with the darker bits of bran that mark it as bread for ordinary people. The wealthy have their white bread, sifted and refined. But Lucius bakes for the poor of the Campus Martius, for the freedmen and slaves and shopkeepers who need to eat and cannot afford to be particular. He pours the flour onto a wooden table, worn smooth by decades of use. He makes a well in the center, adds water from the amphora by the door, adds the starter, a lump of fermented dough saved from yesterday's baking, bubbling with the yeast that gives the bread its rise. Then his hands disappear into the mixture, and the real work begins. The kneading is rhythmic, hypnotic. Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. The dough resists at first, then softens, then begins to take on the smooth elasticity that means it will rise properly. Lucius works without thinking, his mind somewhere else on the rent he owes, on the son who died last winter, on the price of wood that keeps climbing. But his hands remember what his mind forgets. They have done this 10,000 times. By the time the dough is ready, the oven is hot. Lucius opens the iron door and the heat pours out, painting the cobblestones of the alley in a wash of orange light. He rakes the coals into a bronze pan, scrapes the floor clean with a wet cloth on a long pole, and then he begins to shape the loaves. Each one gets the same treatment, a portion of dough, weighed by hand, shaped into a round, then slashed across the top with a knife to let the steam escape. And then the stamp, a wooden block carved with his name, pressed firmly into the top of each loaf before it goes into the oven. Lucius Annius Crescens, his mark, his guarantee, his liability. Because if the bread is short, if he has skimped on flour or stretched the dough with chalk dust or bean meal, the stamp will tell the authorities exactly where to look. The aediles who inspect the bakeries do not need witnesses. They need only read the names on the loaves. And Lucius has seen what happens to bakers who cheat, a fine that strips away everything he owns. Flogging in the forum. In the worst cases, exile, or the mines. The stamp is not pride, it is accountability baked into the bread itself. The first loaves go into the oven on long wooden peels. The heat closes around them, and the smell begins the clean, primal scent of flour and water transformed by fire. Lucius closes the door and waits. Outside, the street remains empty. The Vigiles will pass again before dawn, but for now, there is only the bakery, the heat, the patient work of feeding a city that does not yet know it is hungry. But it will. In a few hours, the first customers will appear, yawning and stretching, reaching for the bread that will carry them through another day. And Lucius will be here, as he always is, the fire in his oven, the last light of the dying night. The baker's fire glows behind its closed door, the heat radiating into the alley in waves that shimmer against the cold stone. But not everyone in Rome seeks warmth from an oven. In the low places, in the corners where the vigils walk a little faster and look a little less closely, there are other fires burning small flames, smoky flames, flames that light the faces of those who have nowhere else to go when the sun goes down. In the Subura, that warren of narrow streets between the Viminal and the Esquiline, a heavy wool curtain hangs across a doorway. It is nondescript, the color of dust, indistinguishable from a dozen other doorways along the same street, but behind it, the night is still young. The tavern is small, a single room with a low ceiling blackened by years of lamp smoke. A counter runs along one wall, its surface stained with circles where cups have sat for decades. Behind it, amphorae of wine rest on their sides, their contents growing sharp with age. The wine is cheap watered before it ever reaches the cup, mixed with resin to cover the taste of spoilage, priced for the purses of slaves and free poor who have only a few copper coins to spend on forgetting. A handful of men occupy the room. They sit on wooden stools, hunched over cups, speaking in low voices that never rise above the murmur of the street outside. There is nothing dramatic in their conversations. The price of pork, the cruelty of a particular overseer, the chances of the green faction in tomorrow's races. They talk to fill the silence, to reassure themselves that they are not alone. In the corner, 3 men cluster around a table too small for them. Between them, a single oil lamp burns, its flame guttering in a shallow dish of cheap oil, sending up a thin trail of smoke that joins the general haze. On the table, dice tumble and fall. The game is simple: a roll, a bet, a hope. The dice are knuckle bones, worn smooth by use, their values painted on each face in faded pigment. The man who rolls them is a slave, his status marked by the simple iron ring on his finger, his face lined by years of work that will never be his own. Across from him sits a freedman, a Greek by his accent, his tunic patched but clean. The third man is a mystery, a sailor, perhaps, or a courier, someone passing through who found this place by accident and stayed. The slave rolls, the dice clatter, spin, settle. The freedman grunts and pushes a few coins across the table. The slave gathers them without expression, but his eyes flick to the growing pile at his elbow. It is nothing, really a few sestertii, enough for a week of bread or a month of cheap wine. But it is more than he had at sunset, and tonight, in this room, with these men, it is enough. The tavern keeper moves among them, refilling cups from a jug, collecting coins with a practiced hand. He asks no questions. He offers no judgments. His job is to keep the wine flowing and the lamp burning, to provide the space where men can forget, for a few hours, what waits for them beyond the wool curtain. Outside, The street holds its own darkness. The Vigiles pass at intervals, their torches painting brief light across the curtain, but they do not push through. The tavern is not illegal. The men inside are not breaking any law that matters, and the Vigiles have better things to do than harass those who seek only a cup and a corner. Near the Circus Maximus, other doors are open. The taverns here cater to a different crowd, gamblers with heavier purses, men who came to watch the races and stayed to lose what they won. The lamps burn brighter, the wine is marginally better, and the dice roll just as randomly. A man can lose a month's wage in an hour here, and the keeper will only smile and pour another cup. And beyond the taverns, in the alleys behind the great public buildings, other establishments do their work. The lupanaria, the small rooms where women wait for men who pay. They are not spoken of in polite company, they are not marked on any map, but they are as much a part of the night economy as the bakeries and the fountains, as necessary to some as bread is to others. The lamps burn there too, behind curtained windows, and the men who enter do so quickly, with their heads down, and leave the same way. The night deepens, the dice continue to fall, the wine continues to flow. In the Subura, the slave rolls again, and this time the numbers fall in his favor. The freedman curses softly, pushes more coins across the table. The sailor laughs, a low sound that dies quickly in the smoke-filled air. Outside, the wool curtain shifts in a breeze that carries the smell of the Tiber mud and rot and the distant coolness of water. The Vigiles have passed. The street is empty. And behind the curtain, for a few more hours, the night belongs to those who cannot afford the day. The taverns still burn in the Subura, their smoky lamps casting dim light on faces turned away from the dawn. But here, at the foot of the Esquiline, there is only stone and shadow and the slow arc of the moon across an empty sky. The Flavian amphitheatre rises from the earth like a fossilized creature, its curves immense against the stars, its arches black sockets in a face turned toward eternity. They call it the Colosseum now, though the name is still new, a vulgar nickname, some say, referring to the colossal statue of Nero that once stood nearby. The Emperor Vespasian built it, and his son Titus dedicated it, and for 20 years now the crowds have poured through its 80 arches to watch death dressed as spectacle. But tonight, there are no crowds. Tonight, there is only the building itself, and the silence it holds within its walls. The moon is past its zenith, beginning its long descent toward the Janiculum. It catches the travertine of the outer walls, lighting the stone in shades of silver and grey, picking out the slight variations in colour where blocks were quarried at different times, from different seams. The shadows of the engaged columns fall across the arcades in patterns that shift minute by minute as the moon moves through its circuit. A man could stand here all night and watch the building change, watch the light travel across its face like water seeking its own level. Through the arches, the interior is visible only as deeper darkness. The tiers of seats rise in concentric rings, invisible now, their marble worn smooth by the thighs of thousands. The arena floor is somewhere down there, covered in sand that has soaked up blood and more blood, raked smooth between spectacles, so that the next day's killings could begin on a clean surface. But tonight, the sand is only sand, and the only thing moving across it is the shadow of a cloud passing overhead. If you stand close to the walls, you can hear it, a low hum, almost below the threshold of hearing, that seems to come from the stone itself. It is the wind, moving through the 80 arched vaults of the outer arcade, each arch a slightly different size, each passage a slightly different angle, so that the air makes a different sound as it passes through each one. Together, They create a note that rises and falls with the breeze, a sound like voices heard from very far away, like the memory of a crowd that has finally gone home. Above the amphitheatre, the sky is clear. The moon dominates, but around it the stars burn with the steady patience of distant fires. These are not the stars of the city, dimmed by lamplight and torches. These are the stars of the countryside, of the shepherds on the Campagna, and the sailors on the Tyrrhenian Sea, visible here because even Rome cannot compete with their light. There, low on the horizon, is Orion. The hunter climbs the sky in winter, his belt of 3 stars unmistakable even to those who know no other constellation. Farmers plant by his rising and set by his setting, timing their sowing to his appearance in the autumn sky. Sailors steer by his position, knowing that when he stands above the mast, they are heading south. Tonight, he looks down on the empty amphitheatre, and his light falls on sand that once ran red. Higher up, the Pleiades cluster together, 7 sisters in the ancient stories, though most eyes can see only 6. They are small, tight, a knot of light that draws the gaze and holds it. In the countryside, they mark the seasons when they rise with the sun. The summer heat is coming. When they set at dusk, the winter planting must begin. Here, above the city, they are only beauty, 7 points of light in a sky full of them. And there, circling the pole, the great bear swings on her eternal tether. The Romans call her Septentriones, the 7 plough oxen, and from her name they take their word for north. She never sets, never dips below the horizon, a constant presence in the night sky for those who know to look. Sailors bound for Gaul or Britain watch her to hold their course, and she does not fail them. The wind moves through the arches. The moon edges toward the hills. The stars turn slowly overhead, indifferent to the city below, indifferent to the blood that has soaked into the sand, indifferent to the crowds that will return at dawn to fill the seats again. The amphitheatre waits, empty and patient, holding its silence against the memory of noise. And above it, the same stars that guided farmers and sailors for millennia continue their slow march toward morning. The stars still turn above the Colosseum, indifferent to the city below. Orion has climbed higher, the great bear holds her place, and the moon continues its slow descent toward the hills. But on the Aventine, something has changed. A light that does not come from the sky is blooming behind the shuttered window of a 3rd-floor apartment. The woman sees it first. She has been asleep, her husband beside her, their children in the smaller room beyond. She wakes to warmth, to a glow that seems to press against her closed eyelids, to a smell that should not be there. For a moment, she lies still, trying to understand. Then she opens her eyes, and the room is orange. The lamp, she thinks. The oil lamp on the table by the door. She remembers filling it before bed, trimming the wick, placing it safely away from the curtains. But the curtains are burning now, and the table is burning, and the flame is climbing the wall toward the ceiling, and her husband is shaking her, shouting words she cannot hear over the crackling that fills her ears. Her scream cuts the night. It is not the scream of a woman afraid of men, of footsteps in the dark, of hands reaching for her throat. It is something older, something primal, the scream of a creature facing fire, the sound that humans have made since they first huddled in caves and watched the woods burn. It rises from the Aventine and travels through the night air, and on the Vicus Loretti Minor, 2 men hear it and begin to run. The Vigiles are 2 streets away when the scream comes. They have been walking their slow walk, testing doors, listening for the crackle that means everything is already lost. Now they have heard it, and the slow walk becomes something else. They run. not toward the building that is burning. They know without speaking that the building is already gone. Wood and plaster, dry timber, the narrow halls of an insula built cheaply and packed too full once fire takes hold. There is no saving it. They run past it to the building next door, and the building next to that, and the one across the street. They run to save what can still be saved. By the time they reach the street, others have seen. Windows are opening, faces appearing, voices calling out in fear and confusion. The Vigiles ignore them. They have work to do. One of them blows a horn, a harsh note that carries across the Aventine, summoning help from the other pairs patrolling nearby. The other begins forming a line, shouting at the residents who have spilled into the street. Form a chain to the fountain, now. The residents stare, frozen. The Vigile grabs the nearest man, shoves him toward the fountain at the end of the street. Water, bring water. The man stumbles, then runs, and others follow. A bucket line begins to form, hands reaching, passing, reaching, passing a living chain, stretching from the fountain to the building that is not yet burning, but will be, soon, if they do not act. More Vigiles arrive. Their torches bob through the darkness, converging on the street like fireflies drawn to flame. The Centurion is among them, his staff of office tucked under his arm, his eyes moving constantly, assessing, calculating. He sees the burning building, the flames now visible through the roof, the sparks flying upward to land on the balconies of neighbouring insulae. He sees the bucket line, already working, wetting down the walls of the next building. He sees the residents, some helping, some staring, some crying, some trying to run back inside to save things that are already ash. "Get those people back," he shouts, and his men move to clear the street. A woman tries to push past, screaming something about her mother. Her mother is still inside. A vigil catches her, holds her, speaks to her in a voice that is calm despite the chaos. The building is gone. "Your mother." He does not finish. He does not need to. She knows. The fire has its own voice now. It roars, it crackles, it pops as timbers split and fall. The heat pushes against the bucket line, forces them back, forces them to wet their own faces to keep breathing. But they hold. They pass the buckets, soak the blankets, throw the wet wool against the walls of the next building. Steam rises, hissing, and the Vigiles watch for any sign that the fire has jumped the gap. Inside the burning insula, the sounds are worse. Things fall, walls collapse, and somewhere, beneath the noise, there might be voices, but if there are, they are already silenced. The Vigiles do not think about that. They cannot. They have work to do. The Centurion counts his men, counts the buildings, calculates the wind. It is blowing away from the densest part of the Aventine toward the river. That is something. That might be enough. He sends runners to alert the other cohorts, to wake the men who are sleeping, to prepare for the possibility that this fire will not stop here. But it does stop. Slowly, hour by hour, the bucket line wins. The flames, finding nothing new to consume, begin to sink back into themselves. The roof collapses completely, a shower of sparks that the Vigiles meet with wet blankets and shouted prayers. By the time the sky begins to lighten in the east, the fire is dead. The street is a mess of water and ash and charred wood. The Vigiles stand among it, exhausted, their faces streaked with soot, their tunics steaming in the cool air. The residents huddle in doorways, wrapped in whatever they manage to grab, staring at the place where their homes used to be. No one speaks. There is nothing to say. The Centurion walks through the wreckage, counting again. 1 building gone, 3 saved. No one knows yet how many lost. That will come later, in the daylight, when the bodies are found and the lists are made. For now, there is only the silence, the smoke, and the slow realization that the night has passed and they are still alive. The Vigiles gather their gear, buckets to be refilled, blankets to be wrung out, axes to be wiped clean. They will walk back to their barracks as the sun rises, and they will sleep, and tomorrow night they will do it all again. Because in Rome, a single spark is a prophecy, and the Vigiles are the ones who read it. The fire on the Aventine has burned itself to ash. The bucket lines have dissolved. The residents have dispersed to whatever shelter they could find, and the Vigiles have begun the slow work of counting what was lost. But on the other side of the city, near the barracks on the Via Lata, another kind of fire still burns a small flame contained in a bronze brazier, lighting the faces of men who deal not with fire, but with its causes. The Prefect of the Vigiles holds court at the third hour of the night, not in a basilica, not in a forum, but in a plain room attached to the barracks, where a desk and a few stools provide all the dignity the occasion requires. The walls are bare, the floor is stone. The only ornament is a small shrine to Vulcan, god of fire, who receives a pinch of incense each night before the proceedings begin. Tonight, there is a prisoner. He was caught 2 hours ago in a warehouse district near the Tiber. A merchant returning late to check his inventory found him climbing out a window with a bag of bronze fittings. The merchant raised the alarm, the Vigiles responded, and now the man stands before the Prefect with his hands bound behind his back. He is young 20, perhaps with the hollow cheeks and stained tunic of someone who has not eaten well in weeks. His eyes are on the floor. The Prefect is not young. He has done this work for 15 years, moving up through the ranks, earning his position through patience and a memory for faces. He has seen 1,000 prisoners stand where this one stands now, and he knows, before any words are spoken, how most of them will leave. The ones who are sorry, truly sorry, will receive mercy. The ones who are sorry only to be caught will receive what they deserve. And the ones who are not sorry at all will be sent to the urban prefect, whose courts meet in daylight, and whose sentences are not measured in stripes, but in years. There are no lawyers here. There is no jury, no advocate, no complicated arguments about intent and circumstance. There is only the prefect, the accused, and the truth, which is often simpler than the law would like to believe. Your name, the prefect says. His voice is tired, but not angry. Anger is a luxury he cannot afford. There are too many nights, too many prisoners, too many small tragedies to carry anger for all of them. Gaius, the man says. Gaius Lucifilius. The prefect nods. A freedman's son, then, or a slave's the lack of a family name tells him that much. You were caught taking goods that were not yours. The man says nothing. There is nothing to say. He was caught. Why? The question hangs in the torchlight. The man lifts his eyes, meets the prefect's gaze for a moment, then looks away. My children are hungry. It is not an excuse. It is not a defense. It is simply a fact, offered like a piece of evidence, and the prefect weighs it as he weighs everything. The man's tunic is thin, patched in 3 places. His wrists, visible below the bindings, are thin. His children are hungry. This is probably true. But the bronze fittings belong to someone else. That merchant also has children, also has a life, also has the right to keep what is his. The law does not ask why a man steals. It only asks whether he did. The prefect considers. Behind him, the brazier hisses as a drop of moisture falls into the coals. The Vigiles who caught the man stand by the door, waiting, their faces blank. They have done their part. The rest is up to him. 20 lashes, the prefect says. Delivered now, in the courtyard, then you go home. The man's knees buckle slightly. Relief, perhaps, or fear 20 lashes is not nothing. It will leave scars, will hurt for weeks, will remind him every time he moves of what happens to those who take what is not theirs. But it is not the mines. It is not exile. It is not death. The Vigiles take his arms, lead him toward the door. He does not resist. At the threshold, he turns back, opens his mouth as if to speak, then closes it again and walks into the darkness. The prefect watches him go. Then he reaches for the wax tablet on his desk, makes a brief note of the judgment, and sets the tablet aside. There will be others tonight, probably. A brawl near the circus, a drunk who broke a shopkeeper's window, a slave caught on the streets after curfew without his master's permission. Each will stand where the thief stood. Each will offer their piece of the truth, and each will receive what the prefect decides they deserve. Outside, the first thud of the lash begins. The prefect does not flinch. He has heard it too many times. He reaches for the incense instead, drops a pinch into the brazier, watches the smoke curl upward toward the shrine. Vulcan, protector against fire, receives his offering. The night continues. And somewhere in the city, a man with 20 fresh stripes on his back walks home to children who will eat tomorrow, because tonight, justice was done in the space between a question and an answer. The lashes have fallen. The thief has gone home to his children, carrying his wounds like a receipt for mercy. The prefect's brazier has burned down to coals. And across the city, one by one, the last lamps are going out. This is the hour between the 3rd and the 5th, the deepest well of the night. The taverns have finally closed their doors, the dice put away, the cheap wine drained to its dregs. The late drinkers have stumbled home or found a doorway to sleep in, and the streets belong to no one. Even the Vigiles have withdrawn to their watchposts, huddled around braziers of their own, waiting for the hours to pass. The city becomes a hollow thing now, a stone skeleton, its flesh of wood and plaster hidden in darkness, its bones of marble and travertine catching what little light the stars provide. The forums are empty basins. The temples are locked boxes. The insulae rise like cliffs above canyons of shadow, their thousands of windows blind and black. For a time, even the dogs fall silent. They have barked at shadows, at footsteps, at each other, all through the earlier watches. Now they sleep, curled in doorways, on garbage heaps, in the warm spaces beneath staircases. Their silence is deeper than any quiet that came before, a void where sound goes to disappear. What remains is the Tiber. The river never sleeps. It flows through the city as it has flowed for millennia, a dark current moving between the hills, carrying the waste of 1 million people toward the sea. At this hour, with no carts rattling over the bridges, no fishermen casting from the banks, no women washing clothes in the shallows, the Tiber makes itself heard. A low rush, a constant presence, the sound of water moving over stone and through darkness. It is not a loud sound. It is barely a sound at all, more a feeling than a noise, a vibration that travels up through the foundations of the city and into the sleeping bones of those who live above it. But in this hour, it is the only sound, and so it fills everything. On the Aventine, where the fire burned, a single figure moves through the wreckage. Not a vigile, they have gone to their barracks. Not a resident, they have found other beds. This is someone else, someone who walks in the deepest dark for reasons of his own. He picks through the charred remains, looking for what? Copper that survived the heat, a tool that can be sold. He does not pause at the place where bodies might be found. He is not looking for bodies. From somewhere across the river, a night bird calls, a single note repeated 3 times, then silence. The bird is answered by nothing. It calls again, waits, then falls silent itself, as if the weight of the hour has pressed the sound back into its throat. The wind picks up, just slightly. It moves through the arches of the Colosseum, producing that low hum that sounds like voices from far away. It stirs the ashes on the Aventine, lifts a thin layer of grey dust, and carries it toward the river. It moves through the cypress trees on the Palatine, making them whisper to each other in a language no one remembers. And still the Tiber flows. Black water, black stone, black sky above. The city holds its breath, suspended between the night that is ending and the day that has not yet begun. This is the darkest hour. This is the hollow time. This is when Rome, for a few moments, is not a city at all, but only a collection of stone and memory, waiting for the first light to bring it back to life. The darkest hour has passed. The Tiber still flows, black and silent, but something is changing in the air above it. The black is softening, imperceptibly at first, then with a steady purpose. The sky over the Janiculum is no longer absolute night, but a deep, endless grey, the kind of grey that precedes colour, that holds the promise of light without yet delivering it. And in this grey, the first smoke appears. It rises from a bakery near the Forum Boarium, a thin column that climbs straight up into the windless air before dispersing into the larger darkness. Then another, from the slope of the Quirinal. Then another, from the alley behind the Temple of Peace. One by one, the bakery chimneys begin to exhale, and the city takes its first breath of the new day. Lucius Annius Crescens is already deep in his work. The oven has been hot for hours, has already baked 3 batches of loaves, and now the 4th is coming out. He opens the iron door, and the heat rushes at him, familiar as a brother, and he reaches in with his long wooden peel to slide the loaves onto the waiting table. They emerge golden brown, crusted with flour, stamped with his name, L.C. on each one, pressed into the dough before baking, now baked into permanence. He lines them up on wooden racks to cool, and the steam rises from their surfaces in small clouds that smell like the only thing in the world that has no complication. Bread. Simple bread. The bakery is full of heat now. The oven radiates from its dome, warming the room against the pre-dawn chill. The loaves cool on their racks, releasing their warmth into the air. Lucius moves between them, checking each one, turning those that need turning, moving those that are ready to the delivery table by the door. His hands are red, chapped, cracked from years of heat and flour and the cold water he uses to wash between batches. He does not notice anymore. Outside, the street is still empty, but not for long. In a quarter of an hour, the first porters will arrive, slaves from the large houses, freedmen who make their living carrying, boys strong enough to haul baskets through the waking streets. They will take the loaves to the Thermopolia, where early workers buy their breakfast, to the rich houses on the Palatine where slaves will arrange them on silver platters, to the market stalls where women will pinch and sniff before deciding which to buy. Lucius works faster now. There is more bread to bake, more dough to shape, more hours of heat before the ovens cool and the work is done. But in this moment, between batches, he pauses. He stands by the racks of cooling loaves and feels the warmth coming off them, the last exhalation of the night's labor. It is a good feeling. It is the feeling of work completed, of hunger answered before it was even felt. Across the city, in 100 bakeries, the same scene repeats. Men and women, slaves and free, their faces lit by the glow of ovens, their hands deep in flour, their backs bent over tables, worn smooth by centuries of kneading. The bread takes shape beneath their palms, stamped with names the customers will never read, baked in ovens they will never see. By the time the sun clears the horizon, the work will be done, and the bakers will sleep while others eat. The sky is lighter now. The grey has begun to warm, just slightly, toward the pale yellow of approaching dawn. The smoke from the chimneys is more visible against it. Grey on grey. 1,000 small signatures written on the air. And still the ovens glow, their fires the last light of the dying night, burning against the coming day. Lucius opens the oven door again. The heat pours out, painting his face in orange. He reaches in with his peel, and the next batch of loaves slides out into the world. Behind him, on the racks, the bread cools. Soon, the city will wake, and it will want to eat. And Lucius will be here, as he always is, the fire in his oven, the bridge between the darkness that has passed and the light that is coming. The ovens still glow in 100 bakeries, their warmth radiating into the grey dawn. But the light they cast is no longer the only light. Above the Tiber, the sky is changing, deepening from grey to pale yellow, from yellow to the first hint of rose. The sun has not yet cleared the hills, but its presence is announced in colour, in the gradual brightening of everything the night had claimed. On the Aventine, the Vigiles of the 7th cohort are finishing their final round. They walk slowly now, not from caution, but from exhaustion. Their faces are grey with soot and fatigue, their tunics still damp from the fire, their feet heavy on the cobblestones. The centurion leads them back toward the barracks on the Via Lata, his staff of office tucked under his arm, his eyes fixed on the ground ahead. He does not look up at the sunrise. He has seen too many sunrises. What he wants is his bed. Behind them, the first cart of the morning rumbles over the stones. It is a delivery cart, piled high with amphorae of oil, its driver a freedman with a heavy beard and a heavier temper. The donkey pulling it is old, slow, indifferent to the driver's curses. The driver shouts anyway, because shouting is free and it makes him feel like he is doing something. The sound of the cart wood on stone, iron on stone, the donkey's hooves clicking and slipping fills the street with the noise of day. Shutters begin to open. Not many, not yet, but here and there along the route, a wooden panel swings outward and a face appears, a woman checking the weather. A slave sent to fetch water before the fountains grow crowded, a shopkeeper assessing the day's prospects before he unlocks his door. Each shutter adds its small sound to the growing chorus, a creak, a thud, the scrape of wood on wood. Near the Circus Maximus, the taverns are dark and silent. The men who drank there last night are gone to their beds, to their work, to whatever morning demands of them. The wool curtain hangs motionless across the doorway, and behind it, the dice lie still on the table where someone left them. They will roll again tonight, but for now, they are only objects, waiting. The Tiber catches the first direct light. The water, which has been black all night, begins to show its true color, a muddy brown, thick with silt, moving with the same purpose it has always moved. The light plays on its surface, not in the silver of moonlight, but in the gold of morning, and for a moment the river looks almost beautiful, almost clean. Then a sewer outlet adds its contribution, and the illusion passes. On the Via Lata, The Vigiles reach their barracks. The gate is open, the brazier at its entrance finally extinguished, its coals cold and grey. The men file through without speaking, too tired for words. In the courtyard, they set down their buckets and axes, hang their wet blankets on lines to dry, and disappear into the sleeping quarters where their beds await. Within minutes, most of them are asleep, their soot-stained faces turned to the wall, their breathing the only sound in the room. At the gate, the day watch is assembling. These are different men, fresh, rested, their boots laced tight, their torches unlit because there is no need for them now. They will patrol the streets in daylight, looking for different dangers, answering different calls. They nod to the night watch as the last of them pass through the gate, but they do not speak. The two groups have nothing to say to each other. They share the same barracks, the same duty, the same city, but they inhabit different worlds, and they meet only in this grey twilight, passing like strangers who happen to share a door. The first full cart of the morning rumbles past the barracks, its driver still cursing, its donkey still ignoring him. A fishmonger sets up his stall near the Tiber island, arranging his catch on a slab of marble, sprinkling water over their gills to keep them fresh. A child runs past, chasing a dog, both of them free for a few more minutes before the day claims them. The sun clears the hills, the city is awake. And the night city, the city of Vigiles and Bakers, of fountains in the dark and dice in smoky taverns, of fire and judgment, and the deepest hours of silence slips away into memory. It will return at sunset, when the shops close and the forums empty and the first torch appears at the end of a dark street. But for now, it is gone, dissolved in the light of an ordinary morning, waiting for its time to come again. Rome turns its face to the sun, the night watch sleeps, and the great cycle continues, as it has for centuries, as it will for centuries more, the city of day and the city of night, forever turning, forever separate, forever bound together in the same restless dream.